what happens is your labor force stays impaired because people make enough money by not working.
This is the key issue right now for a lot of businesses. I mean, you have restaurants that are overbooked, cannot get servers. Jim Cramer was saying he's up to $18, per hour per servers. He's going to move it to 20. It won't make a difference because with that extra 300, I think, in federal unemployment, plus 3 to 700, I think, depending on where you are, you're now at 60, 70, 80%. And people are like, well, people will still go to work. And it's like, yeah, but you're saving commuting and you probably have side hustles and you've lowered your commute expense. So what is going to incentivize people to go back to work? We are now running a dry run with cryptocurrency and, stimulus, a UBI experiment. And the result of this UBI experiment is negative economic growth or throttled economic growth. We cannot be productive if people don't want to work and contribute.
So just to your point,
we need more people to go to work.
So just to your point, on Friday, Montana, which was part of the federal government's, pandemic-related UI benefits program, basically said that we're canceling those benefits and we're opting out. And on top of that, I think they're now offering a $1,200 bonus to return to work. And the problem is because Montana now has a severe labor shortage, but it's not just Montana, it's every state in the union. So we have these two opposing forces, right? We have so much stimulus. We have an undermotivated labor force. We have more taxation that's also just going to be wasted. So very poor ROI. And then now we have input costs going up and prices going up to try to attract people. It's all going to drive price inflation.
Here's the quote from the governor of Mississippi. The purpose of unemployment benefits is to temporarily assist Mississippians who are unemployed through no fault of their own. After many conversations over the last several weeks with Mississippi small business owners and their employees, it has become clear that the pandemic unemployment assistance and other like programs passed by the Congress may have been necessary in May of last year, but are no longer so in May of this year. And can you imagine the hit you're going to take from voters, from woke mobs, from people who believe in income inequality when you say, I think we have to stop sending people free money so they go back to work. Like, this is a very hard position to take. And we now have this occurring on a micro basis in California. We have is it true we have a $75 billion surplus this year as the city devolves? Yeah, and now we're going to take that, and instead of lowering taxes and maybe trying to get Tesla or Oracle or other venture capital firms that have left, instead of doing that, what could we do, David, with that $75 billion?
So great point. So the $75 billion surplus, 1/3 of that is from the federal bailout, which obviously we don't need, and that's the money printing that's coming out of Washington.
So we're giving that back, right, to another state that could use it?
Good luck. Exactly.
Yeah,
no.
Okay.
The other 2/3 is because last year we had all these unexpected tax receipts from the stock market boom. And so you had all these California taxpayers paying capital gains on that. So, but what this highlights to me is, and what I wonder about is how many of those taxpayers have left the state, because we know that we had net migration loss of 182,000 in 2020. So how many of those people left the state and won't be paying taxes this year? And if Biden breaks the stock market through this insane tax and spend, then where is this surplus going to come from next year? And what this highlights to me is I think we have people in Washington and Sacramento, for that matter, who've lost sight of the fact that ultimately the private sector and the public sector are a partnership, because the private sector generates the largesse and the wealth to fund the public sector and to fund the creation of these public goods, to fund education, to fund law and order, to fund social programs. And they've stopped seeing it that way. They see the private sector not as something like a cow to be milked or a sheep to be sheared, but they want to skin the sheep instead of shearing it. And so they're really at risk of killing the golden goose. I guess you could put it that way. And I think that during the Clinton years, just to take a contrast, we had government spending federal government spending as a percent of GDP was between 8.5% and 22%. That was the range. And we had a boom. So when you have a federal spending as a percent of GDP around 20%, it works, right? And that doesn't mean you can't increase government spending. It just means that government spending will increase as the economy gets bigger. But what you have now is federal spending over 30% of GDP, and everything is starting to break. That's the problem.
Very, very big problem.
And of course,
and that's why we're all getting red pilled, right? How many people in Silicon Valley, frankly, who make a living off growth stocks are now starting to scratch their heads going, gee, what did I vote for?
It's definitely becoming a thing. And I would say the purple pill party, you know, like chop it up. Let's mix these two things. Let's candy flip, whatever it takes, like to get out of this, you know, we got to get this party restarted.
Centrism is the answer.
It absolutely is. And, you know,
centrism is the answer.
I think it's probably good for us to take a pause here and maybe talk about this Business Insider hit piece, or what was likely to be a hit piece, but turned out, I think, on the margin fair, calling this All In podcast. And I don't know if this is accurate, but I thought it was pretty funny. Possibly the single most disruptive click in California politics this year. I think they're referring to the four of us. And then, of course, I get absolutely skewered for making clucking noises. I own those clucks. I'm proud of those clucks.
Here's what I'll say. Can I say something? I think that, look, I don't know, I'm a little exhausted about local politics and California politics. I'm not exhausted by federal politics because I think it's an important lens, as David said, into like how we actually conduct business, because all of the businesses we're involved with are inherently global, and America leads. Here's what I'll say though about that article, which I didn't read, like most of these things, which I don't really read.
Never read your press. Rule number one in the game.
I think it's incredibly important to realize that California was a bellwether for opportunity and the ideals of American upward mobility. And a lot of people came here irrespective of the taxes because they sought out like-minded people. They sought out a moderate liberal viewpoint and an economic set of opportunities. Two of those three boundary conditions are changing. And that's why I think California is now important, because it is a canary in the coal mine for the rest of the United States, which is, do we become a balkanized country of 50 states? Or are there like generic, progressive, moderate ideals that everybody can agree to and sign up to, and where governments largely still get out of the way? I don't think, you know, if you look at sort of like tech oligopolists and the hatred we have for them, I don't think political oligopolists are any better. And so, you know, I don't think we want either of them in charge is really the answer.
I think that's a great point.
So we just got to use this election cycle, I think, to kind of like vote a moderate agenda. The most disruptive thing that can happen in California is somebody emerges who is rational and moderate, who says, you can categorize me as a Republican or a Democrat on a whole bunch of issues. I had to pick a platform because this stupid election model makes me pick one. So call me a Democrat or call me a Republican, but the reality is I'm a centrist. Here's what I believe. And if that person gets voted in, then hopefully it changes the conversation for the rest of the country. Otherwise, we are headed to 50 balkanized states operating independently. And Jason, the thing where you make a joke is actually kind of sad. If you get $25 billion and you don't need it, the ideal thing is that you actually give it back to the federal government because you think there's some accountability for all these dollars and it actually is the right thing to do. And the fact that everybody laughs because we know, no, of course not. We'd rather just dig a ditch and fill a ditch for $25 billion or, 2.5 miles of high-speed rail, whatever the crazy thing is. That's kind of sad. And
it's sad and it's corrupt, right? It's a corruption. It's a corruption that we've just gotten used to, which is you're going to take $26 billion that you don't need, that you don't deserve. It's like the school board in San Francisco announcing they're going to open school for one day to qualify for incentives for reopening that Gavin Newsom gave them for $12 million. It's a pure money grab. It's outrageous. It's all about the Benjamins for these guys, and by that I do not mean students named Benjamin.
Wow, there you go, folks. David Sacks punching it up on the next SNL. I wonder why Elon didn't invite you to come with him.
I'm going to stick with I'm not as good as you, Jason. I'm going to stick with my day job. But can we go back to this article? I want to give you my 2 cents on this article. It was behind a paywall, so it was hard to read, but I got a copy of it. Here's my view on it. First of all, I think they did pull their punches a little bit because we did the pre-buttal. You know, we called them out before based on their very biased list of questions they sent me. But in any event, they kind of pulled their punches a little bit. But the article was kind of suffused with this how dare they pissiness, you know, and in a couple of areas. One was, you know, the reporter was very upset that we're going direct, right? We've talked about going direct, meaning going around reporters and speaking directly to the public. It's kind of, well, how dare they do that? You know, they should be talking through us, we, the objective reporters, and then we'll tell the story for them. No, we're going direct. We want to have an influence. We want to speak our minds. And the second thing they're upset about is the fact that we're contributing to these elections. And the reporter made a point of saying that I sought out the Boudin recall. They didn't just come to me. I sought them out and wrote $25,000 as if, what is he really up to? Why did he seek them out? Well, if you want to know what I'm up to, I've written about it. I wrote a blog on, the problem of Chase Boudin. I've written a blog on how Gavin Newsom has moved very far to the left. You don't need to speculate or wonder what I'm up to. I've spent thousands of words tweeting about it and talking about it.
David, they want you to go through them.
Exactly.
And the fact that this podcast has bigger reach than when we go on CNBC or bigger reach than we're in Business Insider. And, when the New Yorker article on Chamath comes out, more people will listen to this podcast than read that article. That's what this is about.
Yes, absolutely.
There's a certain threatening nature to what we're doing here where, as they admit, we're more influential than they are. Well, then why read them? Like, what is the point? Especially if they're doing link baiting, they look dumb when compared to the dialogue we're having here. They can't have the dialogue we're having here because, let's face it, we're for insiders. We see what's happening on the inside, and if we talk to them, they might get 10 or 20% of the picture, and in aggregate, they might get to 50 or 60, but we get 100%.
Let me connect a couple dots because I think what you're saying is really important. In my mind, I think this is another example of like the CDC example or the financial markets example, where in all of these cases, what we have is the following dynamic, which is like if you think about when the newspaper used to hit your front door, right? Like you used to wake up and, when the paper was delivered, right? We all remember that. And you'd pick it up and it was a physical paper. Now, I'm just going to use this number to make an example. Let's just say it was 8.5 by 11. You take this 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, and what you have is a fixed container. And so what there was inherent competition. And so inherently, you had this leverage where it was only the best things that got into the paper, right? They segregated by sections. People wanted to advertise against it. And having a fixed amount of real estate really made that real estate precious. And I think that was really, really important. Now think about what's happened. When you go to that same paper online, let's just use the New York Times, effectively that container has become infinite. And so now you've completely taken away the ability for anybody to actually assign real value. There's no above the masthead or above the fold concept as much as there used to be, especially in infinite scrolling. The point of all of this is why there's no value in coming back and telling the truth. You just go to the next clickbait title, because you just keep on going and you just wonder, hey, wait a minute, to tell the truth is an inconvenient artifact of my business model today. Whereas before, telling the truth was really important. It was an anchor which created more value for you to sell ads. Now it just gets lost in a sea of things.
There's such an agenda.
So the point is, the financial markets in this interesting way is it's one of the few places left where you can vote in real time about the truth. Right. And so, for example, you get all of these readings and you get all of these documents from the Fed, which is the financial markets version of the CDC, but you can vote that you don't believe them. And you can see it every day, the gap between what they say is narrative and what the facts are. And that's a really healthy dynamic that still exists in finance and capital markets. We just need to figure out a way where it exists everywhere else. Otherwise, people will always want to make sure that they have a direct conduit to tell their version of the truth and allow people to decide for themselves.
Before we get to Science with Friedberg, if he gets his camera back up and running, I don't know if you guys know, but Vox canceled us this week with an assist from Taylor Lorenz. The funniest, darkest turn in all of this is the multimillionaire VC is co-opting the language of young women, MLM marketers, in an effort to seem cool and hip with us. why white men are using the term besties. I don't know if you saw that.
I think Taylor Lorenz has had her sense of humor surgically removed. I mean, doesn't
internet's
she
hall monitor
doesn't she understand that this is a self-deprecating, self-mocking bit that we came up with, or that you came up with? I mean, come on, it's a gag. We know it's funny for 50-year-old guys to be calling each other besties. Just
the reason why, by the way, just if everybody wants to know the origin of that, is one of our other friends, Phil Hellmuth, kept calling me Bestie C. And we used to think it was the dumbest thing that we've ever heard. And then what we thought would be even funnier is to just co-opt it. And it was done
give him no credit.
But it was done initially to make fun of how Muth used to call me. Right. Then we used to call
Hellmuth actually has the maturity level of a teenage girl. So
that's true. That's true. With the name dropping,
when he used the term bestie, he was not using it ironically. Whereas we're using it ironically.
Yeah.
Hey, let's talk a little bit about science so we can keep the Friedberg ratio up for all these Friedberg stands, including whichever maniac is running Friedberg's dog's anonymous Twitter handle. I don't know if you talked to Twitter security about that yet, Friedberg.
My dog's on a walk right now. He'll come back and then he can tweet later as well. It is my dog that runs the account. Yeah.
Yes. So much for our ratings. No tweet. Yeah. What is your dog's name again?
Montgomery Wiggins.
With no Montgomery, this is going to be lowest episode in a long time. But
his name was Wiggins at the SPCA where I adopted him from, and I wanted to name him Monty because he's like a hustler. He hustled his way, from the streets of the Mission into a nice condo in Pack Heights. So I gave him the full name Montgomery. So he's Montgomery Wiggins now. Oh, here he is, Monty. Come here. Come on. Up. Come here. Up.
Come on, Monty. Come on, Monty. Okay, tweet something ironic.
Oh, there he goes. Monty.